Hi, today we are going to learn a new topic, which is the demand for money and the price level. For this chapter, the course targets are understanding the asset management and money demand. And then we are going to learn what are the determinants of money demand. And then we are going to learn the equilibrium conditions of money. For these topics, you need to read chapter 10 from the textbook. First, we start to discuss the relationship between asset management and money demand. To understand their relationship, we consider in the economy there is a bank, a consumer, and a producer. And in each period, there will be some income flow into the saving account of this consumer, and the income can come from his wage or his income from other asset investment. So suppose at the beginning of this month, he received 1,000 income in his saving account. And for this month, he decided to spend totally $300 on consumption. But a lot of time, consumers do not spend all the whole month's consumption at once. Sometimes they break into several trips. For example, we assume that this consumer break the consumption purchase into three trips, and each time he spends $100. So for the first trip, he need to first withdraw $100 so that his saving account now has a balance of only $900. So when he withdraw this $100 and eventually he will bump into the producer and buy goods from him, and we assume that this money when it's go to producer will save it in bank immediately. And so that after the consumer spend money for his first $100, and then he get his first bundle of goods, and then he will go to his bank, withdraw another $100, and his balance will drop to $800 now. And then once he withdraw this $100, he will bump into the producer who can sell the stuff he likes. Then he will pass this $100 to the producer, and the producer save it back to the bank again. And then after that, consumer go to banks, withdraw another $100, so that the remaining balance is now $700. And then this $100 withdrawal, he can use that to go shopping, and eventually he will bump into the producers and buy the goods from this producer again, and then the producer save $100 back to the bank as before. If you look at the whole story, now we look at the graph that on the vertical axis, it is the money that is on this consumer's hand, and on the horizontal is the timeline. And we assume that for this month, the timeline starts from time 0 and he walk all the way, proceed to time 1. So within this month, he actually made 3 purchases. The first purchases, we assume is happened on the 1/3 of the timeline. And the second purchase happened on the 2/3 of the timeline. And the third purchase happens at the end of the timeline. So remember, first he has to withdraw $100. Therefore, when he withdraw his first $100, he hold it for 1/3 of time, and then he buy product from the producers, so the money is not in his hand after he spent it. And then remember, after he spent the money, he go back to the bank and withdraw another $100 again and hold cash, and then continue his shopping trip, and then he bump into another producers and then spend that $100 at a time of a 2/3 of the timeline. Then he no longer hold this $100. However, he runs back to the bank and withdraw another $100 again, so that he is holding $100 again for the rest of 1/3 of the time. And then at the end of the period, he spent this $100 again. So if you look at this figure, you will know that even though his $100 is coming and going, but on average, you can see that he is holding $100. So we say that this household, for his transactions needs, actually on average, he demand holding money of $100. So this $100 is his average money demand quantity. even though the total transaction value is 300, which is the total consumption he wants for this month, but actually he only needs to hold on average $100 for the transaction of $300 total for the month. This is the first thing we have to observe. So let me remind you again, for a certain total transaction value, you don't need to hold as much money as the total transaction value. You just need to withdraw cash, for several times. So in this case, he withdraw cash 3 times so that he does not have to hold $300 for the total transaction value. In this example, on average, he only holds $100 for $300 total transaction. Therefore, in this society, government actually only need to print $100 money for the transaction needs. So from here, we can see that government basically supply enough money for average money demand. And the average money demand actually can support a total transaction value that is much larger than the money quantity demanded. So in equilibrium, actually, whatever money that government supply or printed for transaction needs, it has to be equal to the average money demand of the entire economy. Now we want to discuss what determines the average money demand. How come when the consumer is going to consume $300 in this month, but sometimes he would demand higher amount of money, sometimes he would demand lower amounts of money? What are the factors? So first, we recall that actually money demand, MD, is actually represent how much money you spend in each transaction during the period. Remember, here is the money you spend for each transaction. So in our previous example, each transaction is only $100. So actually, the household on average actually only need $100 in hand for a total transaction of $300 for the month. So what that $100 on hand means is actually represent that how much money each basket you pay, which is P, times the number of baskets you bought in that each transaction. Okay? So because whenever you buy something, it is a price times the number of baskets you bought. So if we focus on number of baskets the consumer bought in that transaction, we use the notation L. It's actually determined by 2 things. One is the total number of baskets that he wants to buy for the month, or for the entire economy, that would be the total number of baskets produced, and divided by how many transactions he wants to make. So in our previous example, he makes 3 trips. So totally, he might want to buy 9 baskets. But because he makes 3 trips, so each time divided by 3, each time you only buy 3 baskets. So this number of baskets bought in each transaction is equal to total number of baskets for the month divided by number of transactions. And for the entire economy, whatever basket produced, it will be changed hands through some kind of transaction. So for the entire economy, what matters for the period is the total number of baskets produced, which is actually its total real output Y. And the number of transactions actually represent how many times the consumer make a trip to bank to withdraw money. So actually it represents number of cash withdrawals. So this L actually depends on 2 components. It depends on Y and also depends on the number of withdrawals. And also, the Y should positively affecting the number of L, because as you can see, Y is on the numerator. So when the kind produce more basket, of course, the number of baskets bought in each transaction, holding the number of withdrawals constant, it will be increasing. So it is positively related to the number of baskets for each transaction. And also we can see that given the total number of baskets produced fixed, if the household make more trips to the bank, which means the number of withdrawals increase, then of course the number of basketball in each transaction would drop. So the number of withdrawal is negatively related to L. Now we want to discuss about what determines the number of withdrawal in detail. Basically, the reason that household want to keep money in the bank is because bank, any money that's not withdrawal would earn interest for the household. So therefore, if the interest rate is higher, given the total amount of money we want to spend for the month, you will try to withdraw less each time, which means that you increase your withdrawing frequency. Because by doing so, each time you withdraw less money, which means that most of the money will be able to stay in your saving account for a longer time. So most of the money will be able to earn you more interest income. Therefore, you will try to increase your withdrawing frequency, which means that the money can stay in your account as much as possible, which means that they can earn as much interest income as possible for you. So what we have here in this story is that when the interest rate is higher, even though the household decides to spend $300 for the month, actually he would be willing to take more trips to the bank, which means he's willing to increase the number of withdrawals, so that each time he withdraws less money, which means more money will stay in his saving account to earn interest for the household. In this world, we know that number of withdrawals increasing, which means that each time the basket he can buy will be less. So actually, the higher the interest rate, the lower the total number of baskets he can buy for each transaction. This is what we have for the first part. And now we think about there's other reasons that can affect number of withdrawal for the household, which is the total production. Basically, when there are more product produced for transaction, which means that these higher total amount of transaction will require more total consumption. And if the consumption amount is higher, remember the household would facing a huge amount of money he will withdraw eventually. But any money withdrawn too fast will sacrifice the interest this can earn. Therefore, when the total transaction amount becomes higher, the household will be willing to withdraw his money in a more frequent basis, which means that he will separate his withdrawal into a higher number of withdrawal, so that he will not increase his withdrawing money so much, so that most of the money can stay in the bank longer. So basically what we have here is that when the economy produces more units of real output, this means that it will require the household eventually to withdraw a higher amount of money for transaction. But because he's facing withdrawing higher amount of money, it would make more sense that he increase his number of withdrawals so that this higher amount of the total spending can have more portion of it stay in the bank as long as possible to earn interest. In other words, which means that we know the number of withdrawal increase, actually holding others constant, it would decrease the number of good baskets in each transaction. So here we have that actually the higher the production will also increase the number of withdrawals, which create a negative force to drag down the number of baskets in each transaction. But earlier we also learned that the higher the amount of output that needs to be changed hand for transaction, it would actually directly increase the number of baskets that needs to change hand for each transaction already. We already know it would create a direct effect to increase this L. So as you can see that when the economy produces more output, it creates two opposite forces these two forces against each other to affect the number of baskets in each transaction. So eventually, we don't know what actually would happen to L. But actually, Based on the evidence, we find out that whenever the country's output is higher, the number of baskets in each transaction actually is increasing, just like the graph here, but the increasing speed will start to decrease over time. So it's increasing speed, getting slower and slower, but on average, the relationship between L and Y is positive. So here we summarize. Basically, the average money demand for the household MD is equal to the price P of each basket times the number of baskets in each transaction, which is L. And L actually depends on two parts. Depends on the total output of the economy, Y, and also the interest rate in the economy, I. And a lot of time we would like to divide both sides by price level. In this case, you can see that the money demand divide price level simply represent L, which is the number of baskets bought in each transaction. But if you look at the right-hand side, this number represents money demand divided by price. So actually, a lot of time we call L the real money demand. So it's also based on what we learned in the past, real money demand actually positively related to output Y, and it is negatively related to interest rate I. Now we want to learn the equilibrium condition of money. So recall that when we look at the example, we know that in equilibrium, the total money that the society supply was simply equivalent to the average money demand for consumers. So in that example, the consumer actually on average only has $100 on hand for the entire $300 consumption. So this is the equilibrium result. In other words, equilibrium condition would be that the money supply in the society will be equal to the average money demand of consumers, of households, MD. And this MD, we know it can be decomposed into two parts. One is the price level, P. The other is the number of baskets in each transaction, L. L also called real money demand. And now we want to draw the money demand line on this panel. The vertical axis is price level P, and the horizontal axis is the money. So if we look at money demand, it is equal to the money that household needs for transaction. The average money he needs is equal to the price level times L. So if we fix L, so you can assume L is a constant, then apparently when the price level is higher, then the MD value will be larger, which means the higher the money quantity demanded. So the line will look like what we drew on the graph. It would start from the origin 0, 0 and stretch all the way to the upper right. It will pass 0, 0 is because that if the price level is 0, no need for money for each basket. Of course, you don't need money at all if the price is 0. So remember, this MD line always starts from origin 0, 0. Furthermore, the inverse of the slope actually is equivalent to L. So if somehow this number of baskets in each transaction becomes higher, this L becomes higher, then you can see that this line would rotate to the right. Okay? And it will rotate to the right is because the MD line always passes through origin. So it will always start from 0, 0. Okay? And now we want to talk about money supply. But to talk about money supply, it really depends on what kind of monetary policy we are talking about. First, we look at the policy that is to target a fixed money quantity, M. Suppose government just want to fix the total amount of money on circulation to be on M. In this case, MS is equal to M, which means that it will be on, no matter what the price level is, the money supply is always equal to M. Therefore, it will be a vertical line that's starting from at the level of M and vertical line stretching all the way to the top. Remember, in equilibrium, MS has to be equal to MD, which means that in equilibrium, these two lines has to intersect. Therefore, if monetary policy is to target a fixed amount of money, M, the equilibrium condition will determine the equilibrium price level of the economy, which is P star on this graph. But sometimes monetary policy is to target a fixed price level P bar, which means that central bank is willing to supply whatever amount of money that money demand needs, as long as he can fix the price level to stay steady at P bar. In this case, money supply curve is like a horizontal line stretching from the level P bar all the way to the right. And remember, equilibrium condition of money require these two lines intersect, which means that this monetary policy, which is to fix the price level so the price is very stable, will require the equilibrium amount of money level to be M star. So as you can see that the equilibrium condition of money, it can be used to determine the equilibrium price level or the equilibrium quantity of money. It depends on what kind of monetary policy we are talking about.